Welcome, fourth graders, to the first lesson of week 2, decimal fractions. I'm super happy you're here with me today. What we're going to do is going to require a piece of notebook paper. So I'd like you to get a notebook paper ready to go with a pencil. And what you're going to do is you're going to create a place value chart, just like the one I'm showing you here. So there's two parts to this chart. One is just a fractions column where we're going to be writing some fractions eventually. And then over here, we're going to have the ones column, the tenths, and the hundredths. So for example, if I had the number like 3 7/10, when we do what we're going to do in a minute, you would write 3 7/10. And that's what you're going to be using your chart for. So go ahead and create your chart. If you need to pause, go ahead, pause the screen, and then we'll get right into it. Okay, hopefully you're all ready to go with your chart. And what we're going to do today is we're really going to review the idea of that placeholder 0. What does that really mean and how does it work for us? So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to write 4/10 in the fractions column. So over here we'll write 4/10. Then over here what I want you to write is 0 and 4/10. So we're going to show this placeholder 0, 0 and 4/10. And when we do decimals in math class, oftentimes we'll use this placeholder 0. And the big reason why we use that placeholder 0 is to show that there's nothing in this place value column. So there are no ones in this number. It also indicates to us if there are 0 ones that this number is less than 1. And remember, decimals are just fractions, so that's just a good reminder that when anything to the right of the decimal is less than 1 whole, it might be a whole pizza, it might be a whole dollar, whatever you're kind of dividing up, think about it that way. Okay, next thing you're going to write is you're going to write 400ths. And this particular number is going to have two placeholder zeros. So go ahead and write this decimal the way you think it's supposed to be written. And then I'll go ahead and write it as well. So I'm going to have a 0, 0, and 400ths. And I need to put the 4, this digit 4 here to represent hundredths. It's not 4/10. If it was 4/10, it would be like 4 dimes, which would be 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10, 40 cents, right? 4 pennies is very different than 4 dimes. So when you write a number like this, you have to make sure you have that placeholder 0 to show that there are no tenths and only hundredths. So these two zeros are telling us there are no ones and there are no tenths. And what we're going to do next is I'm going to give you some numbers that I'm going to want you to write the fractions for, and then I want you to put them in the correct place value. Okay, so there's a couple of ways to do this. You can do this to challenge yourself. You cannot use the chart to look at. That would be one way to challenge yourself. Or you can use it if you want the support of the chart. That's fine too. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you a fraction and a decimal, which are the same thing. And then I want you to write them down. So you can use this as a chart or you can do it on another piece of paper. So, and I'll show you the answers in just a minute. So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and write 1 7/10 as a fraction, and then 1 7, I'm sorry, I said that wrong, 1 700ths as a fraction, and then 1 700ths as a decimal. Okay, are you done? I'm listening for you to speak back to me out in video land. Here's the answer. 1 700ths, that would be your fraction, and this would be your decimal, 1 700ths. Remember, the place value 0 tells us there are no tenths because that's the tenths column. Okay, so do you kind of understand how this is going to go? All right, the next number is 3 4/10. 3 4/10. Write that as a fraction and write that as a decimal. Are you ready? 3 4/10 and 3 4/10. So when we say 4/10, we're not going to put a 0 there, even though there isn't a 0 in the hundreds. We can just write 3 4/10. Okay? All right, next one. 6 95/100. 6 95/100. Write it as a fraction and as a decimal. Here's the answer, 6 95/100 and 6 95/100. And remember, I'm not saying 6.95. I'm saying 6 95/100 because I'm in math class, and that's how we think about decimals inside math class. Okay, if we say 6.95 as we're learning about decimals, we might lose track of the place value, and that's the part that I really want you to learn. Okay, the next fraction and decimal I want you to write is 3 60/100. 3 60/100. Write it down quickly, then I'll show you the answer. 3 60/100 and 3 60/100. Now, here I put a 0 because there is no digit in the hundredths place, but because I called it 60/100, I need to represent that 60/100. Okay, the last one we're going to do is 4 3/10. Oh, I said it wrong again. 4 3/100. I'm sorry. 4 3/100. Here's the answer. And then here's the decimal, 4 3/100. No tenths, 3/100. Okay, very good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move on, and I'm going to ask you a question. And on your paper again, I'm going to erase really quick. On your paper, I want you to tell me I want you to circle the bigger number. Okay, so I'm going to write this, and I'm going to write this, and I want you to circle which number you think's bigger. Okay? Has everyone done that? I'm really talking to you guys as if you're here with me today. I think I need a little company or something. Okay, so circle the one you think's biggest, and then we're going to come back to this in just a minute. And what we're going to do is you're going to get your tenths and hundredths grid out. And what I'd like you to do is quickly shade in 6/10. And I think I'm going to flip my pen around and see if I can get a darker color. And then over here, I want you to shade in 60/100. Okay, go ahead and do that. And again, it doesn't need to be super pretty. I'm going to go fast to do this so that we can move along quickly. But so 6/10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So here's my mark. So I'm going to shade this all in. And again, I'm not an artist in math class. I'm just going to shade this all in. Okay. So I have shaded in 6/10. And I'll also write the equivalent fraction, 6 out of 10. 10 equal parts, 6 are shaded. Now I'm going to shade 60/100. So my decimal here is 60 out of 100. So I have 100 altogether. I'm going to shade in 60. I'm going to do it this way this time. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. Now I have 60 hundredths and 6 tenths. What do you notice about these two pictures? What are you thinking? And then I want you to go back to this question. Which one did you think was bigger? And again, I want you to look at this picture and think about which one shows more. And if you answered that they're equivalent, you are correct. So this is really an important idea for today. These are equal to each other. And one way to think about that is if we called 6 tenths of a dollar 6 dimes, right? We would have 6 dimes, or 60 1/100ths of a dollar, we would have 60 pennies, right? So we would have the same amount of money, just in different forms. 6 dimes, 60 pennies, all the same amount. So this is equivalent. So if you said this one's not bigger than this one, you were correct. If you thought this one looked bigger, the reason you probably thought it was bigger was because of the placeholder 0. It looks like a bigger number when we put a 0 there. When there is no placeholder 0, when we're referring to 6 tenths, there really is a 0 there, but we're just not looking at it because we're looking at tenths. So these are equivalent, and I just want you to keep that in mind as we move forward into this unit, because this can get a little bit confusing. Because 6, if you're just looking at these as 6 and 60, you would say, hey, 60 is bigger. But remember, this is not 60. This is 60 1/100ths, and this is 6 tenths. So it's all about the place value, right? Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the number line that I had you print out. So I would like you to get this number line out, and I will put it right side up just for fun. Okay, so this is where things can get a little bit tricky with tenths and hundredths. So I want you to really pause the video if this gets a little confusing, and just think it through as you go, because this might be a brand new concept, or it might be a brand new way to look at an old concept. That's probably more like it. So what I'm going to do is, do you know how we've been, like if this was our number line, this would be 0, this would be 1, this would be 2, and this would be 3, right? Well, today we're going to do it in decimals. So what I'd like you to do is I would like you to write a 0 here, and I'm hoping this is big enough for you to see. So I'd like you to write a 0 there. And here, instead of writing 1, we're going to write 1/10. Okay? And here, this benchmark right there is going to be 2 tenths. And this benchmark here is going to be 3 tenths. So what that's going to ask us is, well, if this is 1/10, what is this? Right? What is that going to be? Any guesses? So this is where it's going to get a little tricky, and I want you to use that placeholder 0 we were talking about. Remember when I just said that that 6 tenths was the same as 60 1/100ths? Well, we can put a 0 here if this helps our eyes. Look at this as 1/10 or 10 hundredths, which are equivalent to each other. So if this is 10 1/100ths, what do you think this is going to be? It's going to be 0.01, and I'm going to call that 1/100th. And then I'm going to go up here, and it gets really squishy. I'm going to write 0 or decimal point 2/100ths or 200ths. This is going to be 300ths. Okay, 400ths, and 500ths. And I'm going to make a benchmark there because that will be my 500th mark each time. And I'm going to do that over here too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to make a benchmark because that helps my eyes see where the halfway point is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, these are hundredths. So this was 500ths. This is going to be 600ths, 700ths, 800ths, and 900ths. Okay. Then this is 1000ths. What do you guess this is going to be? 1100ths, 1200ths, 1300ths, 1400ths, 1500ths. So I'm going to make a 1500ths right there. 1600ths, 1700ths, 1800ths, 1900ths, 2000ths. Now, if I have a placeholder 0 there to show that my 2/10 is the same as 2000ths, that will help me see that this went from 15 up to 20. I can also write it up here, 2100ths. And I'm going to write this down here, 1500ths. Okay, what do you think this is going to be? If this is 2000ths and this is our halfway mark, this is going to be 2500ths. And I'm writing it as fractions and decimals so that you can really see that they're the same exact thing. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, now that we have this set up, I'm not going to go ahead and have you write all the hundredths because that would take forever. What I'm going to do is I am going to have you do the benchmark. So I want you to put a 0 here, a 0.10 there, or 1000ths, 2000ths, and 3000ths. Then I want you to find your halfway mark there. And that's the 500th mark. And then I'm going to give you a number that I want you to locate on this number line. Okay, I want you to find 2700ths. Where would 2700ths be? So again, if this is 2500ths, this mark right here, it would be 26, 27. And this is where 2700ths would be. So basically what we're doing, I feel like, is we're taking the number line and we're putting it under the microscope and carving it up into even smaller parts. Do you see that? So this does not represent 3 wholes. This represents 3/10 or 3100ths. Okay, let's try another one. Let's place the next number on here. Can you place 1900ths? Where do you think 1900ths will be? So this is 0, 100th, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1000ths. So that's 1000ths. So 19, if this is 20, right, it's going to be right about there. Okay? 1900ths. We'll do one more. You're going to have some independent practice on this idea of number lines that are cut up into 100. So I want you to make sure you're ready for this. The last one I'm going to give you is 7/100ths. So go ahead and mark 7/100ths. Again, this is 0, 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, or I can change it to an equivalent fraction that makes more sense to my eyes and ears. 1000ths, 2000ths, 3000ths. where is 7/100 going to be? So if we look up here, we had 100th, 200th, 300th, 400th, 500th, 600ths, 700ths. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This would be where 700ths would be. Okay, so what you're going to do on the next slide is you're going to find 2 workbook pages that you're going to be working on, and I will talk to you tomorrow.